All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 28th, 2025 Kubernetes SIG-Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. For anybody that's new here, that pretty much just means be courteous and nice to everybody. All right, well, you will start with some announcements that we're starting the 133 release cycle. So most of the announcements are related to that. Big upcoming deadlines are the production readiness freeze for new enhancements is next Thursday. I think what that means is that the production readiness team, which reviews all of the enhancements to make sure that there's not going to be really any like issues enabling new features are enabled or introduced and rolled back and everything. They'd like to be aware of and have the KEPs in a pretty much completed state so that they have time to review those. Those reviewers are there's a limited pool of reviewers and they review KEPs from all different areas of Kubernetes. So they like to have a little bit more time. So the ask is any enhancement that's moving forward in this release, the KEP be updated and the production readiness portion of that review be updated for whatever release, whatever kind of state that enhancement is targeting for that release. So again, that's like a little over a week to do that. And then the next deadline is the enhancements freeze. That is, I believe it's February 13th PST, February 14th UST. I can probably confirm that, but I think that's what I saw. And that's all of the enhancements need to meet all the requirements to go into the release, which is the KEP needs to be updated for whatever stage it's targeting and reviewed, and that the pull request needs to be merged. And the production readiness review needs to have been completed as well, which is a requirement for merging that. Yeah, does anybody have any other announcements for today's meeting? Or any questions about the enhancements process if there's anybody new who's working on an enhancement? All right. If not, we can go into the next section. The next section, we usually give a little bit of space if there's any new contributors to introduce themselves, ask questions, anybody like that. It's completely voluntary. If anybody wants to introduce themselves, just either raise your hand or unmute and say hi. If not, we'll pause for a minute and continue with the agenda.
Hello, hello.
Oh,
I'm
hello.
Shivam. I'm a new contributor here and I just joined the first meet here. And I want to know how to contribute and how to get started. I watched some courses on Kubernetes, but that's about it.
Okay, yeah. So first of all, welcome. These community meetings are a good place to kind of come and introduce yourselves. Another good place is the is Kubernetes Slack. I believe there's a link to our specific the SIG Windows discussions on Slack. Where is it? Is it not here? We should definitely add that here. If it's not, I can take care of that. That's a good place for async communication. There are on the contributor website, if you need help getting onto the Slack, there's a link that you can join and just put in your email and it'll send you an invite. After the meeting, I will go ahead and add a link to our Slack channel here and also instructions on how to do that if you're not doing that. In this particular community meeting, I think we're going to focus on what enhancements the SIG is going to try and progress for this release cycle. I think this is usually a good opportunity to pick up a more immediate chunk of work if you want. There's a number of enhancements that are kind of in flight, and there usually or should be opportunities to kind of work on some of these depending on your interests. So I think the enhancements portion is usually the beginning of every release cycle, and the enhancements kind of portion of the release cycle is really short. So we're probably going to use the majority of this meeting going over discussing the enhancements and the state of the current enhancements. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If not, follow-up questions on Slack. It's probably the best way to get engaged.
Yeah, I think I should ask on Slack one day. I have to like read these enhancements and all, or went through them.
Okay, James, I see you just linked a document. Is that
It's just this doc.
oh,
Just
okay. Oh, the agenda. Yeah.
yeah, because I think it has all the links in it. So
Yeah,
you can
and
take a look.
this agenda is open there. In order to edit the agenda, just for future reference, you do need to join the SIG-Windows Google groups. There's a link here, and just an FYI. But yeah, welcome, and hope you get something out of these meetings. Is there anybody else who's new would like to introduce themselves? If not, we'll continue with the agenda. Okay, let's get started. Yeah, I think I saw some agenda items on here. I've kind of just grouped everything into the 133 enhancements discussion. So we can maybe just go down some of these. The first thing I'd like to call out is SIG-Node has been working on some a couple of different guidelines for their enhancements and requirements, especially things that touch the CRI API that I wanted to bring awareness to everybody here, since a lot of the SIG-Windows KEPs do touch the CRI API. This started in some discussions in SIG-Node meetings, and there's a discussion thread on Google Group about this. One of the key takeaways here is that because the CRI API lives in Kubernetes and is shared by the different container runtimes, mainly CRI-O and CRI API, they are wanting to have a little bit more rigor around reviews and changes to the CRI API for SIG-Node enhancements, and I think by extension SIG-Windows KEPs here. One of the big changes is that they are more or less requiring KEPs that touch the CRI API to have some level of sign-off from maintainers of both CRI-O and Containerd. And that's in order to make sure that the two different main container runtimes work, like any enhancements that they're proposing will be able to work with both of those, or I think in our case, we should be able to just get Containerd buy off because CRI-O doesn't support Windows. But there also is a couple of other requirements for the the feature states of the different enhancements in the container runtimes in order to, and how those features are also represented in Kubernetes. So I didn't see where this discussion landed because I was out for a little bit, but I believe they're saying that they want changes merged and at least in beta in whatever that means for either of the container runtimes before the Kubernetes feature can also progress to beta. I think people can read through this and we can discuss this more in depth in the future, in a future meeting, and I'll try and do that too. Because I want to leave time for discussing some of the Windows features. But this is a website or a doc update to the Kubernetes contributor website that Sergey did, kind of to conclude all of those discussions that were happening. So definitely good to check out if if you're either working on or interested in working on any features that touch the CRI API in Kubernetes. Yep, it's not that long. We can discuss that in the future. Now I'd like to spend some time to discuss some of the enhancements that SIG-Windows may bring forward in the next release. James, did you want to take this? I think the WinDSR Win overlay features. If not, I think I can, but
I can do an introduction, but I think you have a little bit more information than I do. Yeah, so somebody asked where we were at with WinDSR and WinOverlay. I think they're both set to beta. flags, and they want to move them to stable or remove them. And so they asked, I said I'd bring it up here, and Mark, you had a little bit more information on that.
Yeah, this has been discussed at a previous community meeting, but I think it's been quite a while, so I'll give a quick overview of that too. So for kubeproxy, there's two feature flags that are kind of Windows specific. There's WinDSR, or direct service return, and WinOverlay, which is needed to support overlay networking modes. Both of these feature gates were added to kubeproxy before before there was essentially a unified set of feature gates for the whole Kubernetes code base, and went in without a KEP. And now all of the feature gates are tracked in a specific Go package, and those are tied to feature or enhancements. And I had asked what it would take to be able to progress both of these features, because I think essentially like they're pretty stable. Like many different cloud provider or like many different cloud providers use these when they're bringing up their CNI solutions, and they're always set. And yeah, per the Kubernetes kind of developer guidelines, like we should progress these features or deprecate them. So what we need to do for these are we need to write what's called a retroactive KEP, and there are a handful of examples of this in the Kubernetes code base, where because this went in without a KEP or a Kubernetes enhancement proposal, we just need to describe what functionality that's enabling, and kind of write a KEP for this as if it was a new feature, with the understanding that it is currently in beta, and also will probably very soon go to stable because it's set for true everywhere. In the past, I had asked for volunteers if there were people who wanted to do this, and I think got a little bit of interest, but nobody had time commitment to do this. Since these feature gates have been there for so long and I have a little bit of time, I will start that retroactive KEP for the 133 release process and hopefully help clean up the code base with that. Yep, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out for that. But I think that should be pretty straightforward. We just need to, document the why this was needed and all of that. Any questions on that? All right, if not, the next one. This is another one that I think has been around for a while, and we need, for the guidelines, we need to make a decision what to do. This Windows host network support for Windows pods. This was an enhancement that I introduced a while ago. I think it went into 126 that went to alpha status, that basically wired up the kubelet. It added a new CRI API field. I need to double check where and everything, so that Windows pods could request that they're joining the host networking compartment or namespace, instead of having their own one created. I tried to do an implementation of this in container D and ran into some issues, and never at the same time I never got really figured out what the issues were with doing that. And at the same time, I think the folks who had asked for that support never really came back and said that they actually wanted that. So I think it's time to deprecate this feature. So I am not entirely sure what the process is for that, but I think unless anybody objects, I'll start that for this release, because this is another one where people have been asking questions about what's the future of this. I believe because this is an alpha feature that never made it to beta, should be pretty straightforward to deprecate. But yeah, if anybody has any objections to that, either speak, but I guess before enhancements freeze for this release. If not, we can move on to the next one. Okay, next one was the node log query enhancement. I was just wondering, Arvin, do we know are we planning on doing anything for 133 with this?
No, I'm not planning to do anything. I was initially planning on trying to move this to like stable, but I think given, there were some bugs found and that have been fixed, I think we give 133, time during 133 to see if anything new pops up. And then I'm planning 134 to make this stable. So I guess I need to go and update the KEP, like just do the paperwork to say, we're not going to stable in 133 or do the target updates in the KEP, but that's pretty much what I'm planning to do at this point.
Yeah, I think that's not necessary. Those are, I think if you want to do that, that's great. I don't think it's strictly necessary. I think
Oh,
it's
okay. I thought because they were so, like, I'm seeing a lot of messages pinging us about KEPs, and I was like, are they wanting to make sure everything is current? So that was the only reason. Yeah, I don't need to do unnecessary churn PRs. That's just paperwork. That's not needed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is just that the new enhancements team for the new releases just making sure that there's awareness for all of the KEPs about around the deadlines and
I see.
and really making sure that KEPs that want to be opted into the release get opted into the release.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
that if things that are kind of holding for that aren't too stale, unlike the other ones, it should be fine to just let that one hang out for another release.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep. Another one is the Windows Node shutdown enhancements. I don't know if this was, I think I was out the last 2 weeks. I don't know if this was discussed, but does anybody, or I see you online. Are there any plans to try and progress this one to beta?
Not in 33. I don't think so.
Okay. Yep. And I think for beta, my understanding is the most of the work that needs to happen in order to move this to beta is just really around testing and getting those Node ED tests running. Is that still correct? Oh, I see. I don't know if you were muted and unmuted. I didn't hear anything.
Oh, regarding the node test, yeah, I'm planning to send a PR to add Windows Node E2E test. Is this also, I mean, need to catch the 133 deadline or something like that? We need to catch that schedule or?
No, I think I am pretty sure that just getting like more test coverage for code that's already in there is pretty much welcome all of the time. That will be subject to either code or test freeze, which is I don't have the schedule at the top of my head. I'm guessing it's sometime in March. Usually the guidelines are if the test code is being introduced to test a feature that's also part of that release, it's subject to the code freeze deadline. If it's just general test updates and improving test coverage, it's subject to the test freeze deadline, which is usually a week later. So I think since this landed in alpha 132 and is not planning on progressing to beta in this release, it should be subject to the test freeze. But we can get more clarification as that approaches. But that should be, I'm guessing, sometime mid-March, but don't hold me to that.
Okay, yeah, I will try to send the first PR as soon as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think getting those Node ED tests running will bring a lot more coverage in areas even beyond the node shutdown scenarios. That's really big improvement there. Thank you for that work. Next one, the CPU memory affinity support for Windows. James, I think you drove this one. Do you have it?
Yeah, so we got the changes merged into the runtime API, but we're waiting on a release from the runtime API folks so that we can then open up a PR to Containerd. So essentially we're waiting on Containerd getting support in Containerd so that we can run some tests and get it off to one of our end users so that they can give us some feedback on how things are working and what needs to change. So yeah, I think just in a holding pattern for the moment in time.
Okay. Okay, yep, that's completely fine to do that since this is a pretty new enhancement. Does anybody else, am I missing any enhancements? Does anybody else have want to propose any new enhancements for this release? Or does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss for the rest of the meeting? I think that was mostly what I wanted to cover just because of the deadlines around PRR enhancement freeze, but I think we can open it up now. Yep. And I did check the agenda for SIG-Node, which is right after this meeting, and SIG-Node is planning on doing the same thing where they're going to go and go through all the enhancements that are potentially being worked on for the next release. So I'm definitely going to join that to see kind of what's maybe coming in the pipeline and what may be progressing with that, since there is some overlap, especially around the CRI list or the CRI only stats and things like that for Windows. And then we can kind of just react to that as needed. All right. I guess nobody has any other topics here. I'm gonna stop the recording. We're gonna give everybody a few minutes back and maybe time to get ready for SIG-Node if anybody else is gonna join. Thank you all.